The hum of roaring engines echoed through the warm summer evening as a group of bikers pulled into a small-town drive-in diner, their leather jackets glinting under the neon lights. Loud, confident, and clearly looking for attention, they claimed the parking lot like they owned the place. Inside the diner, a figure watched quietly from the counter, a woman in a crisp navy uniform, calm and composed. She wasn't there to make a scene, just to grab a coffee after a long day. But the bikers had other plans. Spotting her uniform, their laughter turned cocky, and one of them strolled over, smirking. "Think you're tough, huh? Bet you couldn't handle a real challenge," he said, loud enough for the whole diner to hear. Unfazed, she met his gaze with a quiet confidence that stopped him in his tracks. What happened next would leave everyone speechless. The diner grew silent as the tension hung heavy in the air. The Navy commander, her uniform pressed and spotless, calmly took a sip of her coffee before setting the cup down with precision. Her gaze never wavered from the biker who had challenged her. He grinned, trying to mask his unease, while his friends chuckled nervously from the sidelines, egging him on. The other diners whispered among themselves, curious about who this woman was. She hadn't announced herself, but the insignia on her uniform spoke volumes. This wasn't someone who backed down easily. Outside, the rumble of the bikers' motorcycles seemed to echo the growing tension. "Careful what you wish for," she finally said, her voice steady but full of warning. The leader of the bikers hesitated for a moment before laughing it off, trying to save face. But something in her calm demeanor hinted she was far more than they bargained for. The biker leaned closer, his smirk growing wider as he tried to keep up his bravado. "All right, Commander," he sneered, emphasizing the title like it was a joke. "How about a little race? Unless you're scared of losing in front of everyone." His friends erupted into cheers, their confidence boosted by his challenge. The diners watched closely, some shaking their heads, others clearly intrigued by how this might unfold. The commander didn't flinch. Instead, she raised an eyebrow, her calm exterior only adding to the mystery of who she really was. "A race," she repeated, her tone light but deliberate. "And what exactly do you think that'll prove?" Her question hung in the air, but the leader of the bikers didn't answer. Instead, he turned to his group, making an exaggerated show of laughing. Meanwhile, one of the waitresses whispered to a customer, "I heard she's been deployed overseas, seen combat and everything. They have no idea what they're messing with." The rumor spread quickly, fueling the curiosity of the growing crowd. Outside, the engines of the bikes idled, a low, constant growl that seemed to mirror the bikers' escalating energy. The commander glanced at the door, then back at the leader. "All right," she said at last, her voice cutting through the noise. "But don't say I didn't warn you." The crowd outside the diner swelled, drawn by the buzz of the confrontation. The neon lights reflected off chrome and leather as the bikers revved their engines, trying to amp up the intimidation. The commander stepped outside with measured steps, her calm demeanor making the scene feel even more electric. She wasn't trying to prove anything, at least not for herself, but the way the bikers underestimated her lit a fire in her eyes. The leader smirked, motioning toward an empty stretch of road just beyond the diner. "Out there," he said, pointing. "First one to the old bridge wins." His confidence radiated, but his bravado couldn't mask the slight unease creeping into his voice. Something about her unshaken calm was unsettling, and it wasn't lost on him. A sleek, unassuming motorcycle rested at the edge of the lot, clearly hers. The crowd murmured as she casually pulled on a pair of gloves, her movements smooth and deliberate. "That's your bike?" one of the younger bikers asked, his voice filled with disbelief. The commander simply nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. The tension was thick as she swung her leg over the seat, the engine roaring to life with a sound that silenced the lot. It wasn't flashy, but the power it carried was unmistakable. She glanced over at the leader, her steady gaze daring him to make his move. The other bikers started cheering, their excitement masking the growing sense that this wasn't going to go the way they expected. As the engines rumbled in unison, the air grew electric. The onlookers lined the lot, their whispers filled with anticipation. With one final rev, the leader barked, "Let's see if you can keep up, Commander." But as the engines roared louder, the look in her eyes made it clear. He wasn't the one setting the pace tonight. The roar of engines filled the night as the two bikes shot forward, leaving the diner behind in a cloud of dust and cheers. The leader took an early advantage, his custom-built machine eating up the asphalt. He glanced back, a smug grin spreading across his face, until he noticed how close she was. The commander wasn't just keeping up. She was closing the gap with precision that suggested years of experience. The onlookers, now specks in the distance, had no idea what was unfolding. The straight stretch of road gave way to sharp curves and uneven terrain, but while the biker leaned heavily into each turn, the commander moved with a calm, almost effortless control. The leader's confidence started to crack. "Who is this woman?" he muttered under his breath, pushing his bike harder. Then came the twist. Flashing lights appeared in the distance, bouncing off the treetops. A police cruiser was parked just ahead, its blue and red lights illuminating the dark road. The biker cursed under his breath, gripping the handlebars tightly. He slowed down, panic creeping into his mind as he tried to figure out his next move. But the commander didn't flinch. Instead, she accelerated, her bike weaving through the curves with breathtaking agility. The biker hesitated, torn between risking it all and cutting his losses. But before he could decide, the cruiser's headlights swung toward them, the sound of a loudspeaker cutting through the night. "Riders, pull over immediately." The sudden announcement shifted the stakes entirely. This wasn't just a race anymore. It was a test of nerve, instinct, and decision-making. The commander glanced over her shoulder, her expression unreadable, before focusing ahead. For her, it wasn't about running from trouble. It was about finishing what she started. The leader, now trailing, realized he wasn't just outmatched. He was in way over his head. The police cruiser's siren wailed, closing in fast, but the commander didn't slow down. Instead, she leaned into her bike, the engine roaring louder as she surged forward, leaving the biker struggling to keep up. Panic etched across his face as he glanced back, realizing the officers were now fully focused on him. Suddenly, the commander veered off onto a narrow side road, her movements precise and calculated. The biker hesitated, unsure whether to follow or try to escape on his own. In his hesitation, the cruiser pulled alongside him, and he had no choice but to come to a skidding halt, the officers stepping out with flashlights in hand. Meanwhile, the commander had already disappeared into the shadows, her route carefully chosen. She looped back around to the diner, where the crowd was buzzing with speculation. As she parked her bike and calmly walked inside, the tension broke into a wave of cheers and applause. She simply nodded, taking her seat at the counter, as though nothing had happened. But the twist wasn't over. A man in a suit approached her, speaking quietly as he slid a badge onto the counter. "Impressive work, Commander." The local police were happy to help with the setup. "That biker gang's been causing trouble for months. Thanks to you, their leader's in custody." The room fell silent, the realization dawning on everyone. This wasn't just about a race. It had been a calculated operation all along. The commander, ever composed, picked up her coffee and smiled faintly. "Just doing my job," she said. With that, she stood, leaving the stunned crowd behind as she stepped back into the night, her bike's engine fading into the distance. As the dust settled and the reality of what had just unfolded sank in, the diner slowly returned to its usual hum of conversation. People swapped theories and replayed the night's events in hushed voices, marveling at the calm, calculated brilliance of the Navy commander. Outside, the flashing lights of the police cruiser disappeared into the distance, taking the biker leader and his bravado with them. The waitress who had been watching it all play out couldn't help but smile. "Guess you really can't judge someone by appearances," she murmured, shaking her head in disbelief. The other customers nodded, their respect for the commander cemented by the way she had handled the situation with grace and precision. For the commander, it was just another day. As she rode off into the night, her silhouette disappearing under the glow of the streetlights, one thing was clear. Some battles are won not by strength, but by strategy and unshakable confidence.